let's talk about something kind of weird when you really think about it. Have you ever just stopped and wondered why anything keeps existing? I don't mean how it got here in the first place, but why it's still around right now, in this very second. It sounds almost silly, right? Obvious. But what if I told you that simple question hides one of the most elegant, mind-bending puzzles in all of philosophy? Okay, let's dive in. I mean, really think about it for a sec. A tree gets planted. A planet forms out of cosmic dust. A business is launched. Once it's up and running, does it still need that original push, that creative force, to actively hold it together moment by moment? Or is it now self-sufficient, just kind of coasting on its own existence? Because here's the thing. If you just follow the logic, you walk straight into a trap, a paradox, a contradiction that seems to prove that once something exists, it becomes, well, indestructible and totally independent, which we know can't be right. So where does the logic go wrong?
All right, so let's walk right into this trap, shall we? To really get our heads around the persistence paradox, we first need to understand one key term.
In philosophy, they call this a possible existent. Basically, it's anything that could either exist or not exist. A tree doesn't have to be here. A planet doesn't have to be here. You, me, we don't have to be here. Unlike something like 2 + 2 = 4, which is a logical necessity, these things are optional, contingent. And that's where the whole problem gets started.
Okay, so let's trace the steps on this slide that lead us right into the trap. Step 1, we start with our possible existent. Let's stick with a tree. Step 2, right now, this very moment, it exists. Easy enough. Step 3, now basic logic tells us it can't exist and not exist at the exact same time. That's a flat-out contradiction. So, for this specific instant, its existence is a given. And this leads to step 4. So, in this instant, its existence seems kind of necessary, doesn't it? It's unavoidable. And here's the final twist, step 5. If its existence right now is necessary, why on earth would it need an outside cause to keep it going? It seems to have become totally independent, indestructible even. You see the trap? It's a clever one. For a long time, this really stumped philosophers. One of the first major attempts to solve it came from this brilliant Persian philosopher, Mir-Damad. He spotted a flaw, but as it turns out, it was only part of the story.
Mir-Damad looked at that whole logical sequence and said, hang on, I think the error isn't with the tree itself, but with the statement we're trying to make about it. He zeroed in on this idea of combination. He argued that what's really impossible is combining the idea of a tree that exists right now with the idea of non-existence. Of course that's a contradiction. You got to reject that combination. And you know what? He was absolutely right. But another philosopher, Mulla Sadra, came along later and pointed out that this doesn't actually solve the paradox. It just describes the problem in a fancier way. It tells us that it's a contradiction, but it doesn't explain why the tree's existence isn't as necessary as it seems to be. See, Mulla Sadra realized that to really crack this thing open, you had to dig deeper. The real question wasn't about avoiding a contradiction. It was about looking at that necessity we think we see in the tree and asking, what kind of necessity is it, really?
And this is where we get the breakthrough. Mulla Sadra proposed a master key that unlocks not just this paradox, but a whole bunch of others. He argued that we were all using one word, necessity, to describe two totally different things.
This is it. This is the crucial insight. It's one of those ideas that, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The entire paradox is built on this hidden assumption that there's only one kind of necessity. Mulla Sadra's genius was to show that there are two. And his analogy is just brilliant for explaining the difference. On one hand, you've got essential necessity. Think of a light bulb. Is its light necessary? Yeah. But, and this is a huge but, it's necessary only on the condition that electricity is flowing to it. Its necessity is borrowed. It's dependent. You cut the power, the necessity vanishes instantly. On the other hand, you have eternal necessity. And this is like the sun. Its light is necessary because the sun is its own source of light. It's not plugged into anything. It doesn't depend on an external switch. Its necessity is absolute. It's built in.
So once you have this master key, the difference between these two necessities the whole paradox it dissolves. Let's go back to our tree. But this time, we're bringing the right tool for the job.
Okay, let's run through it again. A tree exists. Is its existence necessary? Yes. But it's necessary with that conditional, borrowed necessity of the light bulb. It has an essential necessity. And that necessity is completely 100% dependent on its cause continuing to act, moment to moment. It needs a cause not just to pop into existence, but for its continuation as well. If that sustaining cause were to stop for even a split second, the effect, our tree, would just vanish, poof, like flipping a light switch off. So you see, the whole paradox was just a big misunderstanding. It tricked us into thinking that any created thing, just by existing, suddenly became like the sun with its own absolute independent necessity. But Mullasadra's insight shows us that every possible existent, every tree, every planet, every one of us, is actually like the light bulb, constantly and actively being sustained by its cause.
Now you might be thinking, okay, that's a pretty clever philosophical solution, but what's the big deal? Well, this distinction isn't just some party trick for winning debates. It's a really fundamental tool for thinking about the nature of reality itself. Because when you have the right conceptual tools, you can just slice right through confusion. Mullasadra believed that tons of other philosophical mistakes were made simply because people were trying to solve problems without this crucial distinction in their toolkit. I absolutely love this quote. He said that some of his critics, even brilliant people like Al-Ghazali, were like someone who carries the weight of a warrior's arms without knowing the art of war. They had all the heavy weapons, all the philosophical jargon, but they didn't have the deep understanding, the strategy to use them correctly. And that's really what this is all about. This isn't just playing with words. Making that distinction between the two necessities, it completely changes our picture of the universe. We go from seeing it as a collection of independent, self-sufficient things to a dynamic reality where existence itself is a continuous, sustained event. And so that leaves us with one last big thought. If everything we see around us, from the tiniest particle to the biggest galaxy, is a possible existent, if everything is a light bulb and not a sun, what does that imply about the ultimate source of that power? What does it say about the nature of reality itself that it requires this constant active sustaining just to be?